Let's talk about the big story here, which is Shedeur Sanders. At one point, we thought he might be the number 2 overall pick in the NFL draft. And now we head into day 3 and he's still on the board. I understood that maybe teams were reluctant to pick him in the first round because they felt like he had a limited ceiling. And you could see why a team might say, if this guy's ceiling is Jared Goff, do I want to use a first round pick on him? I might even be able to understand the second round, but now we're getting into the fourth round here, and this is crazy. Shedeur Sanders has the ability to be a starting quarterback in the NFL. And I know that we say that a lot of times about guys that get picked in the mid rounds, but it's very rarely true. Usually you're picking a guy in the mid rounds on day 3, and it's like throwing a dart at a dartboard. You're hoping maybe you hit the bullseye, but more often than not, you're not going to. It's very rare that a day 3 quarterback becomes a quality starting quarterback in the NFL. It just doesn't happen very often. Shedeur Sanders is a guy that has the talent now to do that if he's picked on day 3. It's very clear to me what's going on here because we were talking about this before we started recording, Glenn. There are guys that were drafted already that had far worse red flags than Shedeur Sanders. We've seen guys that were drafted in previous drafts that had far worse red flags than Shedeur Sanders. We're talking about guys that committed assaults, DUIs, all kinds of crimes. As far as I'm aware, Shedeur Sanders hasn't done any of that. And so now he slides into the fourth round. And so at this point, you have to figure that this is the league sending a message to the Sanders family. They're telling them, look, you're not calling your shots. We're tired of all this bravado. We don't want to deal with your nonsense. Nobody wants to deal with somebody who's going to go running to the media and making a fuss if even the slightest thing goes wrong. You could go down the list of what the complaints would be here. And obviously, there's some truth to all this smoke that came out about Shedeur Sanders coming off poorly in interviews. I had originally thought that it was being exaggerated because, as we know, Glenn, these types of things tend to be exaggerated this time of year because teams are trying to send false information out there to mess with other teams. But if he's still sitting there on the board in the fourth round, there's got to be some truth to what was being put out there. Now, what I've said is that at this point, if you're being honest with yourself, Justin Fields is a low risk, high reward gamble. Nobody who's being honest with themselves should be counting on Justin Fields to be a long-term answer at starting quarterback for the New York Jets. You hope that somehow he can put it all together, but we all know that the odds are not all that high that he will. So if you were to tell me that you want to give him the opportunity to have the year and get some breathing room, and you don't want to draft a quarterback in the first round, okay. You want to tell me you don't want to draft a quarterback in the second round? Fine. But now we're on day 3. And at that point, you would be crazy not to take somebody that you think has potential to be a starter at the quarterback position when you don't have any true established answer there. And so what I told you, Glenn, before we started recording, and I'm sure there are plenty of people that are going to yell and scream and disagree with me and say, I wouldn't take that kid under any circumstances. I wouldn't sign him as an undrafted free agent. You don't usually get the opportunity to get somebody with Shedeur Sanders' talent this late. So if it were me, if I were Aaron Glenn, I would place a phone call to Deion Sanders. And what I would say is, Prime, I'm going to level with you. I want to talk to you one-on-one like a man. We're contemporaries. We played at the same time. We were both at the same position. We were both all-pro caliber talents. I'm a coach. You're a coach. Let's talk about this man-to-man and cut the bull. We all know why your son has fallen. I'm willing to take him if he's on the board at number 110 on day 3. However, because he would be a fourth-round pick, I'm just not going to be willing to put up with any of the nonsense. So if stuff starts getting leaked, if he starts showing an attitude, if I hear anything from you in the media, I'm going to just straight up get rid of him. So if you're okay with that, if everything I just told you is okay, then I will go ahead and draft him if he's on the board at number 110. But if it's not, we're just not going to draft him. That's what I would do. Now, I don't know if Aaron Glenn has even had that thought. Maybe the Jets have decided they want nothing to do with him in any round. Maybe they just don't like him at all. Who knows? But my theory is, unless you absolutely can't stand this kid, at this point, why not take a shot when you're talking about the fourth round? Now, Glenn, you and I were talking before we started recording, and I understand what you're saying. Well, what happens if Fields struggles and people start screaming loudly for Shedeur Sanders? Let's be honest about it. If the Jets drafted Kyle McCord or Riley Leonard or Will Howard or any of those guys, if Fields is playing poorly for a decent stretch, fans are going to start screaming to get Fields out of there and put the rookie in, no matter who it is. Yes, the screams might be a little bit louder if it's Shedeur Sanders, but the bottom line is it's up to Justin Fields to play well enough that nobody's yelling for his job. And so at this point, I think if he's on the board at 110, if you're Aaron Glenn and you have that conversation with Deion Sanders, you may as well just bite the bullet and take this kid because you're not going to get an opportunity to get somebody like him at this point in the draft in almost any other year. And like I said, not only could you just get rid of him if he acts up or you decide you don't want to deal with him, but let's say you have him next year and he doesn't look like he's going to be the goods. Okay, then go ahead and draft a quarterback in 2026. Let's not forget, the Jets drafted Jordan Travis in the 5th round last year, right? I don't think anybody's going to be screaming and crying about the wasted 5th round pick that the Jets used if the Jets wind up cutting him and he never does anything meaningful for the team. So that's where I'm at with Shedeur Sanders. I think it's very clear what's happening here. And if it were me, considering his level of talent and the fact that the Jets don't have an established answer at quarterback, this late in the draft, I would call Deion Sanders, have that conversation with him. And you say to him, too, you say, listen, Deion, here's the other thing. He's going to get every opportunity here. As long as he plays the good soldier, you have my word, he will get a fair opportunity here. And let him make the most of that opportunity. He'll have a chip on his shoulder now, looking to prove everybody wrong. Let him come in and prove everybody wrong. So that's what I would say to Deion Sanders, and that's what my approach would be right now. Like I said, I'm sure there are going to be plenty of Jets fans that will yell and scream and say, you shouldn't do that no matter what round. Don't even sign him as an undrafted free agent. But that's where I am with this right now. I think it's a rare opportunity that they have a chance to take advantage of. But that said, Glenn, I'm not expecting them to do it. If they do, I'll be surprised and in a pleasant way. I know some people won't be pleasantly surprised and they might criticize the Jets for it, but I think it would be a bold move and the type of bold move that this team actually needs because they don't usually take chances like that at a position as important as quarterback where the risk is so low.
Yeah, I'd love to know what happened in these meetings for him to still be out there because for what he did in college, you would think there's no way he belongs on the board right now. He should have been taken. But the most shocking thing to me was when the Steelers passed on him a second time. Like the first time you kind of get it. As I said, Todd McShay said that, people had told him the Steelers like him, but they don't 21 like him. Well, they don't 83 or whatever they were like him either. And this is a team, it's so many different things going on here. Proud franchise that doesn't have losing seasons, right? They just don't. They don't have a quarterback right now. Their head coach has dealt with some of the most difficult players in the history of this league. When you look at having Antonio Brown and Le'Veon Bell and right now George Pickens, like this guy knows how to manage difficult personalities. And even Mike Tomlin is like, I would rather not have a quarterback than have this guy. Which again, to me, I was live during it and I said like it's got to be Shedeur here. This is what makes sense. You go to the Steelers and they don't have a quarterback. When they passed on him, that was like wow. Like I don't know what what's really going on here because I'm not in those interview rooms. I don't know what's being said. You and I talked it and Dion may have walked it back at some point, but it wasn't very long ago that he was on television or podcast, whatever he was doing, kind of telling the world, "Oh, we're not letting any bad teams take him. If you haven't proven you can develop a quarterback, and he kept it, classy by saying, I'll call these teams behind the scenes and let them know that we're not coming there." And they thought that he was a top 5 or 10 guy who was going to have his pick of the litter. And it turns out a lot of teams didn't need him, and maybe some of the teams that were considering him got turned off by the fact that you're telling them, I'm going to let you know who can and can't draft my son. And I just look at it and think, if I'm a GM, if I'm an owner, I'm looking at this and Dion's outspoken personality, and it's natural that he's going to defend his son. I expect that. But I think, what if Shedeur has a slump and we got to sit him? And then Dion's going on social media criticizing us and like, and I think it was Rappaport who said during the draft they cut to him. He updated on Shedeur a million times, and he said teams are understanding that if you take Shedeur, you get everything that comes with it, and that means what having Dion in basically in your life, in your football life. So the talent and the draft slot, like there's zero reason he should not have been drafted by now. And I think teams are just scared by the fact that by the way, and I believe it was Pelissero, but I'm not 100% sure, who reported on the way Shedeur spoke to some of the teams in the interview process. And I even said at the time, I said maybe he's just blowing these teams off because he knows he's going in the top 10 or believed, and teams that are at 18, 19, 20, 21 are talking to him, and he's kind of laughing it off and not taking it seriously. And if that was the case, that word gets around and teams talk and they figure this stuff out. So I don't think there's anything malicious behind it. I just think if you're going to treat the interview process like that, and if you're going to come with the baggage of a high profile Hall of Fame father who's not going to hold back if he wants to let you know that you're doing something wrong, um, I think you have to be a generational type product. And what he is a very good product who will probably have a winning record as an NFL quarterback. But I mean, I don't even have to say maybe teams aren't willing to put up with it. We know they're not. We know that what he offers, teams have let this go over 100 picks now and not taking a guy who completed 70% of his passes in college and turned around a program that averaged 1 win a year for the couple seasons before he got there. It's really remarkable, the whole thing. But what's his name? The Trey Wingo put out a tweet. I just happened to see it scrolling through, and I guess the algorithm put it on my timeline. And Wingo's thing was the reason Shedeur hasn't been drafted yet is because no team has deemed him worth drafting yet. That's it. Teams want to win. If they believe you're good enough to help them win and you fill a need with blah 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 blah, that's it. Now I don't think he's 100% right, but I think he's mostly right. I just don't think teams view him as a guy who's going to step in and turn your franchise around. And if that's not the case, is he worth everything that comes with it? And up to now, teams have told us no, that he's not worth it in their minds. And again, the Steelers, like that was the one team where I felt like they need a quarterback. They're never without a quarterback. They're going to be in position to take one, and they have the perfect head coach and a guy that specializes in dealing with difficult personalities. And even they've said no twice.